everyone, welcome back to my channel called Sharma, and my name is Sharma, and in today video I'm going to show you how you can actually install the Emissary Ingress, which is Envoy Proxy supported by the Ambassador Labs from the getambassador.io. And the Emissary Ingress itself, it's an open source Kubernetes native microservice API gateway. It's a similar way it works as an Nginx, and the reason I'm bringing up and promoting Emissary Ingress because it's a Envoy Proxy, which is created by Lyft itself, and it's used vastly in a lot of major companies like Amazon Web Services, Airbnb, Google, Medium for the article-based company, Netflix, Stripe. It's really good and really highly compatible for the microservices to act as an API gateway to support the multiple or independently rapidly publishing your services and exposing through the Emissary Ingress. And in this video itself, I'm actually come up with a whole EKS monitoring series. So I'm thinking of providing some sort of a more in-depth advanced details knowledge about some of the monitoring series in which I'm going to provide some of the stuffs, some of the topics you can say about how do you deploy stuff inside EKS cluster, as well as how do you monitor your resources or the services or the microservices which is running inside the Kubernetes cluster itself on Amazon Web Service. So in the topics, these are not in the priority order. I'm still in process of thinking about how I'm going to tackle it, but I'm thinking of creating a playlist inside YouTube. I'm really new to YouTube, so apologies on that part if you don't find it that some of the videos are not aligned, but I try my best. But some of the things which I really want to cover in the series itself about how does the Emissary Ingress is installed and configured with the node network load balancer on Amazon Web Service inside EKS. And then I will also wanted to show you guys how do you install the Kubernetes stack via Helm using a custom values.yaml inside the EKS. We will also going to discover in one of the video in the upcoming video about the service monitoring for Emissary Ingress. How do you create a dashboard inside Grafana to see the Emissary Ingress or the Ambassador Edge Stack dashboard? I will also thinking about, I find out like in the Kubernetes stack itself, the Grafana admin passwords is only provided by a values.yaml file. In any production or in any big company, it is highly not recommended that you just pass your Grafana admin password via values.yaml file. So I will just gonna create like a 2-3 minute video to share with the audience how you can actually pass it via secret.yaml and reference that secret inside your values.yaml so that it's not been pushed into the Git in your source code, right? As for a security best practices. I'm also thinking about it of writing an article as well as making a video about the Fluent bit, because now the Fluentd has been deprecated. I am using Fluent bit from so long in my company for last 3-4 years, so I thought why don't I just make a videos, and it provided more in-depth knowledge about how do you use and exports the logs into the CloudWatch log group. And another thing which I was thinking about of deploying EFS for persistent volumes for Grafana in the multiple availability zones. So these are like some of the topics, ideas I just had in mind, and it might be there is a lot more. I'm gonna start thinking about it. So, but if you have other ideas in mind which you like me to take care or make the video for you guys, I'm happy to provide in-depth knowledge on that area as well. All right. Uh, Enough of the chit chat side now. So everything which I'm going to deploy it itself is actually under the infra public repository. It's by name itself, it's an infrastructure public repository created by me itself under the name Sharma. So I will provide the link of that one as well, where you can find, go inside the AWS, you can go inside the emissary, and that's where you find the public.yaml file. Now this file we will going to use at the time of installing the Helm release for the Emissary Ingress. And this video is going to be short enough just for installing and configuring the network load balancer for Emissary Ingress. And you may be wondering why I'm actually putting so much focus on Emissary Ingress versus the Nginx Ingress controller. It's a simple reason, because everywhere if you're going to look for exposing your service via Ingress, you will always gonna find Nginx Ingress controller. There is a huge vast majority of the audience can provide you in-depth documentation or the videos about how to use Nginx controller, how do you install it and configure it and expose your services via the Ingress or using an Nginx. But there is not much. I find it very less information has been provided about the Emissary Ingress itself on the in the platform in the internet world. And the reason I like Emissary Ingress because of it's built on it's a really great API gateway tool, and also it's built on Envoy Proxy, which makes it really interested to work around. And you can read all this information about what things they support on the Emissary Ingress itself. I'll provide it the link as well. It's not a sponsored video. It's just a personal preference of using the Envoy based proxy, which I'm using from the Ambassador Lab for Emissary Ingress. Now let's go to the installation side. For now, in order to have the install the Emissary Ingress itself, the first step we need to do is having the repository add, which is the data wire repository in the Helm, right? So now this is I already opened my terminal. I'm gonna also increase my screen size. Now couple of basic pre-requirements. You make sure you have a Kubernetes cluster up and running, and depending upon which region you deployed in, so make sure you have authorization in the IAM role or user to make those changes or to deploy stuff. So this is my just a test account, and you can see if I just go to Ohio, I have one cluster running with the Kubernetes version 1.27 as far as I last remember. So you can see I have a Sharma EKS cluster which is running 1.27. Keep in mind the cluster can be cost consuming, so depending upon what sort of workloads or the node groups types you're running in, it might be a little cost expensive as well. So please bear in mind about your cost and have put some sort of a CloudWatch billing alerts, so that if you're reaching certain threshold, you get the alerts and you can stop the service or destroy it completely if it's a complete test environment. All right, so now first step is like adding the data wire repository on inside your local client, and now it's done. Now, so we already have now added this repository to our Helm client with the following command. Now the first step, in order to have the Emissary Ingress to be up and running, we need to have the customer resource definition to be up and running. So now I'm currently focusing on the latest version, which is 3.81, but it might be even if you're going from 1.13 to any other version, make sure you have the custom resource definition is already installed. That's the minimum requirement, because Emissary Ingress itself includes a deployment in the Emissary system namespace, which is called Emissary API extension, and this is the API server extension which is required to converting your Emissary Ingresses CRDs between the version V2 to V3 Alpha 1. And for any reason, if your deployment for this one got failed, then your emissary will not able to work properly. Okay, so just keep in mind on that part. Now what we're going to do is simply and I can actually just also show you just running the I have a so I already set the alias, so I'm just going to run the kubectl get pods -a for listing out in all the namespace. So there is a couple of you can see a basic ports which I'm currently running in, and there is, if I just check, do I have any, what are the total number of namespaces I have? So you can see monitoring, kubecast, kubesystem, public, node lease, and default. So there is no namespace for the emissary system itself, but when I'm going to apply the CRD itself, it will going to create everything for me. So I started running, and what I'm doing here is I'm just simply running the applying the CRDs, and then I'm just waiting for 90 seconds to meet the condition of the deployment for Emissary API extension to be uh, past the health check. So, and you can see like all the custom source definition dot API extension dot Kubernetes.io is configured, creating unchanged. If you see some things are unchanged in my case because I have deployed in the past, and when you just delete the namespace or something, the cluster role, because they are not name specific, so they are does not get deleted by itself, so you have to manually delete them. That's why you're seeing it's not created or configured, it's actually saying unchanged because I didn't delete in the last uninstall of the Emissary Ingress. So all now if we just go and see the pods under the Emissary system itself, if that's the correct namespace, then we can see all the pods are running fine. This Emissary API extension is doing nothing apart from using for conversion of our Emissary CRDs between the version v2 to v3 alpha 1. And as they mentioned, this deployment needs to be running all the time. If this deployment having an issue, then it's not going to be able to work it out. Okay, now in order for the Emissary Ingress chart to be installed, the simple step is very simple. You can just run the Helm install command and it will work. But the problem comes up when you go and having, because it's an Ingress, so you will have to create a load balancer. Now that load balancer by default is going to be a classic load balancer. Now Amazon itself does not recommend to have a classic load balancer uh, because firstly it's an old generation and it's not as effective for exposing your APIs or microservices via an ingress. So for this demonstration, what I have done, I have my own internal file, which is similar file to be exactly as the file which I provided for the values-public.yaml. And this is the custom values.yaml file where I'm putting up certain attributes in it. And one of them is setting up the ambassador ID to set to use emissary. And I have, I think, also enabled the HP on it. So I have enabled the auto scaling with 1 to 3 replicas, and this is, since this is whole just showing the power of Emissary Ingress, and I'm not trying to replicate with a production environment or pre-production environment. So depending upon where you deploying those resources or this Emissary Ingress, it might be the chance you will have to modify it and change these replicas to maybe 30 depending upon how big is your cluster and how many workloads or the services you're exposing to. And apart from these, there is other changes I have made it itself inside this values.yaml, and one of the key important one is the service. So if you see in the service itself, the type is load balancer type, and I have added the annotation of the service.beta.kubernetes.io about NLB, which stand for the network load balancer. I provided the SSL port for 443. I have also added the get ambassador v3 alpha module type, and if you notice in the ambassador ID, I provided the same ID which I have actually used in past in the environment variable. And apart from this, there is other certain annotations has been passed. One of them is the SSL ELB security policy and also the SSL certificate. Now the reason for we need to use the SSL certificate so that when we making exposing any microservice or the request, it can be actually being secured in that in your domain, right? And here I'm just passing the port and some other information. You can actually go through each. I provided in the comment as well what these are using for. There is other, some of them is the default values, but you can feel free to modify those values based on your custom needs. And the same values I have in my internal .yaml, which is not been pushed to the GitHub repository because of the security reasons, because I'm using my own custom ACM, which is the AWS certificate manager for passing it. And now what we will going to do here, we will going to first go to the documentation again and try to create the namespace and pass and see the rollout step. But we will going to modify this source code and pass the our custom value. So you can have the option of setting up certain values by using a set argument, or you can just pass the whole file using a dash f. And what is happening here is it's nothing, it's a Helm, which is a Kubernetes package manager. And what we're doing here is we're just running the install in the namespace emissary, and then create the namespace if it does not exist. The release name is the Emissary Ingress, and the chart name is the data wire Emissary Ingress. And that's it. That's nothing else. No complex things are happening at this stage. And then we are adding an end command where we're saying kubectl rollout status to be output to us in the namespace emissary for the deployment emissary ingress with the white output. And if I just run the -f, and if I just type internal testing emissary values, in your case it's going to be the emissary public values.yaml if you have cloned the file. All this information which I'm actually providing here, I have also recently posted published one of the article on Medium about exposing Grafana with Emissary Ingress. For this demonstration, I'm not going to the Grafana yet because I would like to make the short videos for the team or for the audience, so that they can actually able to learn it out and get understanding more in depth. But you can actually follow and see and try to understand the whole documentation. Now, one more thing I would also going to point it out to you guys, that it's a member only story, and I'm really sorry for the people who cannot afford to read it, because the Medium only supports nowadays, if you are a member, then it's only going to publish to the members unless you pay for it. So what I did it, I actually put it the same readme for the same article under the Kubernetes stack itself. So the same article information which you will find here, for any reason, if the Medium has blocked you because you run out of your free stories per month basis and you're not a membership with a Medium, then you can read the whole article here itself. And that's one of the reason I try to publish the same thing in providing the information here itself. So whichever the way works for you or for your team or for yourself, go for it. Let me know if you have an issue. I'm happy to respond it either on the repository itself or on the YouTube comment on the video itself. And now what we're going to do, we're just going to install the emissary ingress with the providing the chart name inside the namespace emissary by passing the internal testing emissary values.internal.yaml. If we have provided everything's correct, and if there is all the information has been passed correctly, then we will going to see. Now another thing which I think mentioned in the past videos as well, try to use Kubernetes Lens, which is an awesome free open source tool. And you can actually, in the latest version, you can actually just filter out based on only the certain namespaces which you are interested in. So for example, if I'm only interested in these two namespaces, I can actually see about all my pods deployed in the emissary and in the emissary namespace, and it provided all the information about the deployment, daemon sets, stateful sets, your horizontal pod scaling, which we're going to see because we enable the horizontal pod scaling in the values.yaml file, which you can see directly here. And by default I provided the minimum replica is 1, maximum replica is 3. So it's only at this stage because there is no workload is exposing any services through the emissary, so there is no required to be having the 3 of the replicas to be launched. And you will see now it's passed the health check, and we can see all this informations here itself. And you can see the setting up of the emissary ID as an environment variables, which I did. And I have also actually configured to authenticate with the Ambassador Cloud as well. You don't have to do it, integrate and connect your service to the Ambassador Cloud because it's a paid service. You can use it for free for some period of time, but it's up to you and up to your requirement in the workload. That's pretty much it in this video, where we able to install our Emissary Ingress inside the EKS cluster, and we have included the customer resource definition for emissary inside the emissary system namespace, and that deployment need to be running all the time because that API extension is using to converting the resources API version v2 to v3 alpha 1. That's the major requirement. So please make sure your emissary ingress CREs for this deployment is in the emissary system namespace, keep running all the time. Now, what's the next step from here? Firstly, a couple of things you need to make sure what we have deployed, it's working or not. So I'm going to show you from both ways right now quickly. So now we have deployed the emissary itself, and we can see it is a part of the deployment, not a part of a stateful set or something. So we can see simply the emissary ingress is this deployment which is using, and one pod is deployed. If I click on the pod, it's currently I can go to the pod here itself, and I can see all the information about the pod name, when it was created, all this information, which image I'm currently using in, and is there any volumes, and every other informations which is basic informations you will find. Okay, now if I go to the network services, you will see there is a services sector, and you will see because we have actually created an external load balancer on AWS, which is a network load balancer, and you will see like certain attributes of the informations, the annotations which I have added about the NLB and the certificate manager actually being passed here. And we can see the ensure the load balancer is actually created, and this is my external load balancer IP. It's fine because I will going to delete just after the ending of making of this video, so do not worry about like this IP or anything because that's not going to be used anywhere else. And now also I will gonna show you, so this is the under the, and the best part of using the Kubernetes lenses itself is it also provided you the getambassador.io, which is the all the CRDs which you have, you can see, which is supported by the emissary ingress itself, and you can see all this CRDs information here itself, and you can simply go to the listener, and you can see this is a listeners which we created for the emissary to listen on. And similarly we will going to create in the upcoming videos about how to create a host, how do we going to create a mapping, and how does the mapping will going to map to the service, and then we will going to use some selector as a labels to expose it to the host and map it up on the Route 53. As I mentioned, like all those informations which will going to upcoming up in the following videos, and this is just a starting video to provide it the information. Now the last thing before I wrap it up around this session, one of the other important thing is make sure when we have deployed stuff, it's passing the health check, because that becomes a very important thing. Currently, I think I deployed everything in the Ohio region. So keeping in mind, wherever the region you're deploying in, go to that region and see the load balancer. So this is the load balancer, which is currently on almost like a 5 minutes ago, which is 9 a.m. in the morning for me in the Queensland time, and I can see the status is active, and this is the load balancer, but I can actually see the same load balancer IP in the network services section, which is ADF60, and we can check ADF60. You can check the same information from your command line terminal as well using a kubectl or kubectl, and then if you just type inside the emissary, and we will see the list of emissary ingress type load balancer, and this is the external IP itself. And you can actually also describe the service itself, which is emissary ingress under the namespace emissary, and that will provided us the description about all the type, the events, is it normal, working fine, or it's having a problem. We can see the annotations, we can see the service labels, every things which we have added and provided. All right, now the load balancer is actually active, and we can see it's a network type load balancer, not a classic type load balancer. And the beauty of the emissary ingress itself, if you just keep scrolling down in the technical in the deployment section, you will go to the emissary ingress with AWS, and you can find out a different load balancer type, like a classic application type, and they will also provided up the load balancer annotations which you can add accordingly what type of load balancer you like to use for your application. And before I just wrap it up, I have one last thing I would like to show you is make sure so you can see I have only allowed the TLS port on 443, and the port is the target is the target group is my emissary group where my EKS ports are running. So if I just click on the target group, I will see the target group, and this is a very important thing from your point of view to make sure that it's passing the health check. I have provided one to few tips in the article itself, how to troubleshoot and how to check if it's passing a health check or not. If you don't see it from the Medium article because of restriction, please go and read it from the README. But you will make sure the health check is passing. If the health check is not passing for your targets, then it's going to be a problem. Then means we cannot expose the service itself to the outer world. And that's pretty much it, and there is nothing else. And this is the security policy which we have provided in the values.yaml, and this is my certificate which I have attached to the this load balancer. You can add more certificate. I will going to provide those informations in the upcoming videos as well. This video is only about installing the Emissary Ingress, what is an Emissary Ingress, and how do we install the network load balancer for exposing the service. And in the upcoming videos we will gonna start where we left from, about how do we create the host and mapping, and how do we expose certain services exposing through this load balancer using an Emissary Ingress. That's pretty much it on this video itself. Thank you so much for listening me and supporting me. As I mentioned, a couple of the articles and the topics which I'm thinking about, it may be not the right ones, maybe there is more. I some If I get time, I will try to create more into them and try to share more knowledge for you or for your teams to get in more experience into the Kubernetes world and try to get more hands-on to do what you like to achieve with the workload or you're trying to run. Thank you so much for your time, guys, and have a great day. Bye bye.